Tonight, we begin with a development that Pentagon officials had feared, anticipated, and quietly prepared for. A move that unfolded not over weeks or months, but in a matter of hours. Hours that changed the security posture of an entire continent. Hours that forced emergency meetings across 3 time zones. Hours that made world leaders reach for secure phone lines they hoped would stay silent. What Vladimir Putin did today crossed a line that American defense officials had desperately hoped would hold. And when that line broke, NATO did not hesitate. They responded with speed, precision, and unity. For months now, there had been signals, not official statements, not diplomatic cables, just signals that Putin was preparing something unprecedented. Russia has been aggressive, yes, but they have been predictable in their aggression. Their moves have followed a certain rhythm, a pattern, almost a choreography. But what set off alarm bells in Washington this week was that the pattern went silent. Intelligence analysts who monitor Russian military activity know the indicators: the troop movements near border regions, the encrypted communications between command centers, the repositioning of strategic assets. All of that went quiet. And whenever Russia goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. Early Tuesday morning, satellite reconnaissance detected what they described as an unprecedented deployment of strategic military assets, including mobile missile systems that had not been activated in over 18 months. These are the kinds of weapon systems that Russia only deploys when signaling something very specific: imminent action, territorial ambition, or a direct challenge to NATO's eastern flank. Western observers didn't know which category this fell into or whether it fell into all 3 at once. But what they did know was that Putin was changing Russia's military posture. And when a nuclear power shifts posture without explanation, the Pentagon pays attention. British intelligence confirmed the movements. This was not a drill. This was operational. The warning issued by the Pentagon tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Senior officials after emergency briefings described Putin's move as reckless, destabilizing, and inconsistent with any known defensive posture. Russia wanted to intimidate. They wanted NATO to pause. But intimidation only works if the target hesitates. NATO did not. Within 6 hours of detecting Russia's escalation, NATO activated rapid response protocols across 4 member states. These weren't standard diplomatic protests. These were operational deployments assets that NATO only moves when preparing to defend alliance territory. Tonight, Ukrainian military command confirmed that their forces launched precision strikes on Russian forward positions, including a command post recently reinforced for what analysts believe was a major offensive operation. Ukraine struck before Russia could consolidate. They hit ammunition depots in occupied territory. They hit communication relays coordinating Russian artillery. They hit logistics hubs preparing to support a renewed ground assault. In other words, Ukraine targeted the nervous system of Russia's escalation. This is what made the Pentagon's warning so urgent. Putin's escalation wasn't just symbolic, it was actionable. And Ukraine responded with force, not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They hit command and control nodes. They hit the pressure points that matter. And here's where the story becomes even more significant. Pentagon analysts now believe that Putin's latest move was designed to test the resolve of NATO after months of political uncertainty in Washington. Putin wanted to see whether the West would fracture under pressure. But instead, the opposite happened. NATO didn't equivocate. They issued a response that was so swift, so unified, that even Moscow noticed. You don't get the Kremlin's attention easily. But today, the alliance did. Military strategists describe Putin's shift as probing behavior, a way to identify weaknesses and exploit divisions. But NATO proved today that they remain both vigilant and capable. Their deployments were coordinated so precisely that Russian tracking systems couldn't anticipate the full scope. NATO is not a passive observer. They are an active deterrent. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of the Allied response. American F-35 fighters carried out extended patrol missions along NATO's eastern boundary, forcing Russian reconnaissance aircraft to retreat. British naval assets targeted tracking operations in the North Sea. Polish ground forces reinforced defensive positions near the border. This wasn't just a press release. This wasn't just diplomatic signaling. This was operational coordination. This was alliance cohesion under pressure. And alliance cohesion is the one thing Putin has struggled to break since February 2022. Remember, Putin thought NATO would fragment under economic pressure. He thought European dependence on Russian energy would divide the alliance. He thought American political divisions would paralyze Western leadership. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. NATO is more unified than at any point since the Cold War. European nations are increasing defense spending at historic rates, and Ukraine has proven far more capable than Moscow anticipated. What makes this moment so dangerous and so revealing is that Putin's latest move happened at a time when he is under extraordinary domestic pressure. Russian military hardliners want faster results. Economic elites want an end to crushing sanctions. Nationalist factions want escalation regardless of consequences. Putin is balancing these demands while fighting a war that has lasted far longer than promised. And when leaders in that position make sudden aggressive moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. The Pentagon statement, now circulated to all NATO member states, was designed to signal that the United States will not allow Russian aggression to go unanswered. Defense officials said plainly that Putin's actions were inconsistent with responsible nuclear state behavior. That is diplomatic language for this is unacceptable and we are prepared to respond. You don't hear that tone from the Pentagon unless something serious is at stake. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Zelensky addressed his nation in a defiant speech tonight. He said, "We did not choose this war, but we will choose how it ends." He said, "Every missile they fire, we answer." And he said, "Ukraine stands not alone, but with the free world behind us." These are statements from a nation that understands how high the stakes have become. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Putin's latest move wasn't isolated. Along with the military repositioning, Belarusian forces conducted unusual exercises near the Polish border. Russian cyber units launched probing attacks against Baltic infrastructure. State media increased threatening rhetoric targeting NATO capitals. When Russia moves multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. Intelligence analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Putin is preparing for a renewed ground offensive before winter. Another is that Putin is attempting to create a crisis that forces negotiation on his terms. A third possibility, the one worrying officials most, is that Putin is attempting to fracture NATO. But today, NATO took that card off the table. They didn't hesitate. They didn't send mixed signals. They acted. What we're watching now is a test of resolve. Putin wants to see if the West will tire before Russia does. Ukraine wants to show that determination matters more than resources. NATO wants to prevent escalation without appearing weak. Tonight, we've heard from senior defense officials monitoring the situation hour by hour. They say Russian forces have paused their repositioning, possibly reassessing after NATO's rapid response. They say communications intercepts suggest confusion within Russian command structures. But NATO is not retreating. NATO is reinforcing. Their response today sent a message that aggression will be met with strength. And it sent a message to the world that the alliance remains unbroken. As the week goes on, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Putin hoped to achieve. But what we do know is that the Pentagon's warning was timely. It reassured allies. It clarified American commitment. And it forced Moscow to reconsider its assumptions. What happens next depends on what Putin does in the next 72 hours. If he retreats, this moment will be remembered as successful deterrence. If he escalates further, NATO has already shown they are prepared. And tonight, for the first time in months, Putin appears uncertain. The Kremlin is quiet, too quiet. And when Putin is quiet, it means he is recalculating, because tonight, Vladimir Putin learned something he should have learned long ago. NATO does not bluff. Ukraine does not break, and the free world does not abandon its principles under pressure. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The alliance held, the warning was heard, and the response was exactly what this moment demanded. We will be here watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.